True Story Media.
Hey guys, it's me, Javier. Every now and then I come across a podcast that I'm listening to that just stops me dead in my tracks, and I'm like, I need to share this with my audience because if I like it, chances are you'll like it. And today I'm going to introduce you to a podcast called Everything They Missed, and it's hosted and investigated by Stephanie Tinsley. So, Stephanie, this podcast is about possible wrongful conviction. It's about police mishandling a case. Now, we've heard this a lot, right? Like if you've listened to a true crime podcast, chances are you've listened to a podcast similar to this. But what makes Everything They Missed different from all those other true crime podcasts?
That's a great question. And I have been a true crime fan since the 80s. So, yes, police misconduct and a gruesome murder are nothing that we haven't heard before. What made this unusual and why I decided to take this case on is it's not just a potential wrongful conviction story. What I learned and what drew me into it is behind every wrongful conviction, the real killer's still out there. And that's what I wanted to pursue. And when I learned who the evidence was pointing towards, I hired my own private investigator. And as a first-time podcaster with no investigative experience, I found this person and I pursued her.
You see, this is what I love about this medium, right? Because podcast has democratized investigative journalism, right? Like now more citizens could take on the journal and wear the journalist hat and uncover evidence that sometimes just the police and investigators don't have time to pursue. And so that's awesome. I have just started listening to the podcast, so I'm really new to it. I'm digging in, loving it, and I cannot wait to learn more. So here's what we're going to do. Let's play the first episode of Everything They Missed, a podcast that you can get anywhere, right?
That's right.
Yeah, Apple, Spotify, the whole
Anywhere
nine yards.
you get your podcast.
All right, so listen to this first episode. If you like it, subscribe to Everything They Missed because it sounds like a wild ride, and I think my listeners are going to enjoy it. So, Stephanie, let's go ahead and play the episode.
The following story discusses individuals connected to the case of Danny Harris. Except for those previously convicted in this matter, no one mentioned in this series has been officially named a suspect, person of interest, or found guilty of any crime related to his death.
If this shit don't stop, I'll be to sue the pits out of your little justice system. Do you understand me?
Feel free to sue whoever you'd like, but our investigation will continue.
For what? I didn't do anything.
The investigation being discussed here, it's no small matter. It's a murder. One of the most savage murders I've ever come across. And this tape, it's being heard publicly for the first time.
He killed a man, huh?
That's to be determined.
Okay, well, they're telling me that you're asking questions about me for what? That shit was closed years ago with Mullins and everybody else.
Well, it's open again.
And who let you open it?
We opened it. And we're just doing an investigation right now.
For more than a decade, this case has been considered settled. But when I was first introduced to it, there were far more questions than answers. This tape and other new evidence threatens to unravel what many would like to forget. What do they have to hide? Let's find out. I'm Stephanie Tinsley, and this is Everything They Missed. Episode 1, Protocol.
The smell of death is undeniable. It goes through sheetrock, it goes through ceilings, it goes through walls. Once you've smelled one or two, you can never forget that smell.
Joe Jackalone is a tough East Coast retired cop. You could say he's seen his fair share of dead bodies. And over the past year, he's become my go-to in making sense of crime scenes. Because death and murder are not my world. At least they weren't, until I came across this story. It starts simple. On an afternoon, October 26, 2007, at an apartment just outside Memphis, Tennessee. That's where 55-year-old Danny Harris called home.
So Danny Harris had been living in this apartment complex in Cordova, Tennessee, which is about 15 minutes outside of kind of downtown Memphis area.
This is attorney Jason Gishner, who knows this case well.
Just so you can kind of get a feel for what this place is like, it's kind of one-story buildings where people have their own unit, parking place out front, probably 1,000 square feet or less. Brick apartments kind of all in a row, one-story type deal. Well, Mr. Harris had been living there for some time, and some months had passed where he hadn't paid his rent. Apparently, he had a good history of paying his rent before. So the people that run the property were essentially doing a welfare check on him to be like, what's going on here? They knock, nobody answers. They're concerned. The apartment was locked and the alarm was on. So obviously, the last person who left the apartment was somebody that knew the code or knew how to turn the alarm on. So they go inside, realize something really bad has happened here, and the apartment manager at that point says police need to go in and take care of it from here.
The apartment was silent. The AC was cranked as cold as it could go. Air fresheners were plugged in. Glass candles burned down to the wick were scattered around the living room, and a towel had been stuffed under the bedroom door. All of it were obvious signs for officers to call it in, but nothing could have prepared them for what was behind that door.
So the police go in, and what they encounter is a horrible crime scene. You know, Mr. Harris is in his bedroom. He has obviously been dead for a long time.
Danny Harris was on the bed, 1 foot hanging off, his arms above his head. The white bedspread had so much blood on it, it had turned pink. His face was unrecognizable. His skin was so decomposed, it had turned black. His shirt and shorts had white stains, like they had been splashed with bleach or kerosene. Hanging from his mouth was a towel, jammed in with such force, it drove a tooth into his lung. His pacemaker told the rest. He had been dead for 2 months.
You've got a crime scene in the bedroom where he's essentially laying on the bed. He's been like this for a long time. You have some blood around the house. You have disheveled paperwork, things of that nature. It appears that some things in the apartment have been removed. Looks like a TV's been taken out of there.
Who would have so brutally murdered this father of 4, a 30-year veteran of the Tennessee Air National Guard? At first, they considered maybe this could have been a random break-in or a drug deal gone wrong. But if that were the case, we wouldn't be here. Because the things that they would uncover made one thing clear. This murder was personal.
This episode is brought to you by Squarespace, the all-in-one website platform for building your online presence and getting your work out into the world. So here's the thing. I've been podcasting for 8 years now, and one lesson that I've learned the hard way is that you need a home base, somewhere that's yours, not just a social profile that could disappear tomorrow and get buried with the algorithm change. Squarespace is how I think about that. You grab your domain, your name, your show, whatever you want to claim, and then you build around it. Their templates are actually good looking, and you don't need to know how to code. There's a thing called Blueprint AI that walks you through the design process, and you can just pick a template and start dragging stuff around until it feels just right. The other side that I appreciate is the services side. If you do any kind of consulting, coaching events, whatever, you can showcase what you offer, book appointments, send invoices, and get paid all from the same place. You don't have to Frankenstein set up 6 different apps that barely talk to each other. And if you have content that you want to monetize, video, courses, members only stuff, you can gate it behind a paywall and charge a subscription or a one-time fee. It's all built in. So check out squarespace.com/pretend for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, use promo code PRETEND to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Again, that's squarespace.com/pretend. Use promo code PRETEND. So I've been trying to simplify how I get dressed in the morning. I don't want to think about it too much, Just grab something, throw it on, and know that it's going to work. That's kind of what I love about Quince. They've got everyday essentials down. Organic cotton sweaters, polos for pretty much any occasion, lighter jackets that actually keep you warm when the weather's doing that weird in-between thing, All the basics, but they actually hold up. Here's the thing. Quince works directly with top factories and cuts down the middleman. So you're not paying for brand markups. Just quality clothing that's built to last and still look good season after season. Plus, they only partner with factories that meet rigorous standards for craftsmanship and ethical production. The wool coat that I picked up is honestly holding up way better than any other coat I've bought that costs way more. It looks good, it keeps me warm, and it didn't break the bank. Refresh your wardrobe with Quince. Go to quince.com/pretendpod for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada too. That's QUINCE.com/pretendpod. One word.
The first 48, you hear that a lot. In New York City, we used to call it the golden hour, the first hour of the investigation, because that's when your perpetrator is as close to you as possible. They're not that far away at this point.
Again, this is retired NYPD detective, and the voice you heard at the start of this episode, Joe Jackalone.
The first 48, it makes for great TV. It just kind of gives you the urgency, let's put it that way. There's an urgent part to get this thing done as fast as you can, because the longer it goes, the worse it gets.
You've probably heard the phrase, the first 48. The idea that the first 2 days of an investigation are the most critical. But the reason Joe says it makes for great TV is because it is. An A&E reality show that was filmed in Memphis.
For homicide detectives, the clock starts ticking the moment they are called. Their chance of solving a murder is cut in half if they don't get a lead within the first 48 hours.
And the detectives who arrived at the crime scene are the same detectives who starred in it.
Sergeant Caroline Mason, a 4-year homicide veteran, will work the investigation.
While we can't confirm the first 48 cameras were rolling the day Danny Harris was found, what we do know is this. One of the first discoveries inside that apartment would shift the stakes entirely. Inside the bedroom, Sergeant Carolyn Mason found a photo and a program from the Sheriff Department graduation ceremony. She stepped outside and told the officers, "He's a friend of ours." The photo was of Chris Harris, a well-known officer of the Shelby County Sheriff's Department and SWAT team. What detectives didn't know is that Chris was the son of the victim. At first, they actually thought Danny was a black man. His body was so decomposed that his skin had discolored. So they asked Chris if he knew anyone who lived at the apartment, and they were stunned to learn that Danny was his father. Confused, Chris asked them what was wrong, and instead of giving him an explanation, they told him just come to the scene.
I mean, you walk in and you saw somebody who was in full decomposition, right? I mean, it's just, there's no question about it. The skin had already started to turn different colors. So rigor mortis was already come and gone. Livor mortis was the blood that settles in the dependent areas. That's now done because of the decomposition just totally eats the body away. So most people have seen things worse in horror movies at this point. But the issue that comes down to is it makes for investigations extremely difficult because of the condition that the body is in.
His father decomposed for 2 months in bed. That was the scene Chris was invited to. The two had been estranged for some time. After his divorce, Danny turned to alcohol and had become distant, not just from Chris, but from his entire family. Even estranged, who knew what Chris felt knowing his father was in that condition? Guilt, rage, horror? The fact that he was allowed at the crime scene at all, Jacqueline tells me, was not by the book.
The golden rule is you treat every death as if it's suspicious until proven otherwise. And this way, you don't run the risk of trampling a crime scene if it's a potential crime scene, right? There are certain things that you just can't control, right? So anytime the cop enters the room, you technically have disturbed the crime scene. So the protocol should be every death, the detectives are notified, the detectives should come in and do a preliminary investigation, which would include snapping some photos, taking a look at some of the things in the room, see if there's something missing, something like that. If you couldn't figure out that this was a homicide just by looking at what's going on, then, maybe the cops should be writing parking summonses instead. I mean, there's blood spatter on the walls. There's something stuffed in his mouth. I mean, it screams homicide. What I do question is the condition that the victim was in. To bring the son in to try to identify, what's going on right there. I mean, that could have been very traumatic for this individual. But, there's other questions I have is like, it's been 2 months since the last time you spoke to your dad, right? So there could be some other kind of incident where they're estranged or there's other issues going on. And if you're the police, do you really want to now bring all that into this at this moment?
Should Chris Harris have been kept away from the crime scene? For all they knew, he could have been a suspect. He could have lost control, but he was one of their own. So if there were rules, they bent. Quietly. And the more I started to ask about what happened that day, I'd find it wasn't the only questionable decision they made. So when they start processing the scene, now there's a rag stuffed down Danny's throat, a red rag. So was the red rag tested for DNA?
No.
Was the comforter that he was found laying on tested for anything?
Nothing was tested for DNA. The only real testing that was done on the scene was blood spatter testing that was done by a police officer who I have some pretty serious concerns whether he was qualified.
There was no shortage of evidence that this was a homicide. The blasting AC, the candles burned down to the wick, the air fresheners and outlets, all of it like someone was desperate to mask the smell. But did the cops treat this scene with proper protocol and care? I'd say that's debatable at best. There was an alarm system that was never dusted, a bath mat and towel in the washing machine, and women's jewelry on the nightstand next to his body. The other towel that was under the bedroom door, left untouched. The one stuffed in Danny's mouth, same. And if that's not bad enough, there were 5 bloody fingerprints, but detectives only collected 2 that day. And if all of these items they missed sound sloppy and half-assed, then I don't know how else to prepare you for what's coming. Because it gets worse. Much worse. If you're a true crime fan, you've probably heard all this 1,000 times before. Another botched investigation. I'll admit these flaws aren't exactly new or shocking. I know I've heard them all before. I've been a true crime junkie since before that was a known phrase. I'm talking decades. But what led me to the investigation of Danny Harris wasn't a podcast, news story, or family member. It was actually another murder. which my entire life got pulled into.
Hands counting 911, where's your emergency?
This is Alex Murdoch at 4147 Moselle Road. I need the police to answer immediately. My wife and child just got badly.
It's the most twisted and high-profile murder of recent history.
One of the most notorious murders that we've ever had in South Carolina.
2 members of a prominent and powerful legal family found dead on a sprawling estate.
The Murdaugh murders. The wealthy South Carolina attorney who killed his wife and son in 2021.
Breaking news, the very latest in the Alec Murdaugh trial that has captivated the country.
A husband and father facing decades behind bars.
My husband, trial attorney Mark Tinsley, was connected to the case, and we found ourselves at the center of a media firestorm. Netflix filmed a documentary at our home. So did Dateline, 2020, all the major crime shows. For years, I'd just been a viewer. Now, I was watching top-tier producers getting a behind-the-scenes look at how my favorite shows were made. But I also began to see another side. There were some journalists exploiting victims for clicks and headlines. And that's when it hit me. I realized I wanted to tell one of these stories myself. So I started looking. The week I started researching, if you believe in coincidences, a case found me. My son came home and said his friend Lucy got up at school assembly and did a presentation on her dad, a lawyer. His work sounded fascinating, so I gave him a call and explained to him the type of story I was looking for. That lawyer was Jason Gishner. He told me about a handful of cases, but there was one that stood out. It was ongoing, one that made him the most nervous to talk about.
That's what worries me, is that I'm not ready for this story to be out of the world, because once that happens, I lose control of the narrative.
Jason was hesitant at first, about me, about the idea of putting the story into a podcast. But eventually he opened up. For me, what started as a side project quickly became something else entirely. I had no idea where the story would take me, the people I would meet, the dangerous places I'd end up. It wasn't just true crime anymore. Jason and I spoke about the case often, and to him, his focus came back to the first 48 hours, the people and the things that were missing. For instance, Danny's truck, a 2006 GMC Sierra, along with a large TV and a .40 caliber pistol. Detectives put out a bolo, be on the lookout for the truck, and tapped into their networks of pawn shops, back alleys, and confidential informants for tips. They were shaking trees, and that's when someone came forward. She went by the name Snow.
Snow, his real name is Janice Jefferson. She's a woman who was living in Memphis, who was a confidential informant who had been working for the police, and also had a home where she would rent a room out of her house.
I think Snow is the kind of person that probably had her own substance problems, is working with the police both to make money and also probably to make some of her own personal charges go away.
Late August, 2 women showed up at Snow's doorstep, Tammy Vance and her daughter Sarah Lucas. Tammy was a heavy-set, sharp-tongued woman from Louisiana who Snow knew from running around at the local smoky bars. Sarah wasn't far off from her mama, but that day something was off. Tammy had a black eye and a circular wound on her forehead. Tammy said a man named Danny had roughed her up while drunk, then felt so guilty he checked himself into rehab and left her his truck. They were broke. Claimed they tried pawning a bulky tube TV, but no one would take it. Snow had heard 100 stories like this before, but she needed the money, so she took the TV as payment. She figured that'd be the end of it. But the next month, Tammy was broke again. So she popped open the truck's front seat and pulled out a gun, asking Snow to help her sell it.
So Tammy Vance is driving around in this truck, and Snow doesn't think it's Tammy's truck. She thinks that Tammy's driving around in a stolen truck. She calls up the police, drops the dime on Tammy, and says, look, I think this lady's driving around town, her and her daughter, in a stolen truck. And they run the truck, they figure out that it's stolen, and pretty soon after that, people start connecting the dots that not only is this a stolen truck, but this is a stolen truck that belongs to a guy that they soon find out has been murdered.
And directed officers to a Mapco gas station just down the street.
Snow was sitting there on the porch and heard all the sirens and couldn't help herself and goes over there to see what's happening.
That's Elizabeth Bowling. She's a talented attorney who's great at finding cracks in the story. And the two of us have been working to piece everything together.
And then when she gets there and watches them arrest Tammy, she goes over to them and tells those police officers that there's more possible evidence at their house. So she invites them back to the house. Andrew, her son-in-law, opens the door and lets the police in. And they want Snow and her daughter to come down to the station to give their statements about it. They were riding down in a police car, but Andrew, even though he doesn't have a license, he follows them down to the police station so he'll be there when they're finished giving their statement and he can give them a ride home.
Police question everyone, including Andrew, the man who gave the women a ride to the station. But no one is providing anything useful until Tammy Vance starts to talk.
It seems like Tammy was obviously considered a suspect because she was driving a stolen truck, but she pretended that she didn't know Danny was dead.
Eventually, she gets tired and starts to break when she recalls the strangest chance encounter that began 9 months earlier.
Tammy met Danny through a dating site, and I believe that was to be around January 2007.
Clark Chapman isn't a man of many words, so I was glad to talk to him for this podcast. He's interviewed Tammy Vance more than anyone else. He tells me back in early 2007, Danny Harris was lonely. He wasn't looking for love, just someone to share a beer or a cigarette with. He was so lonely, he started dialing strangers.
888-MEGAMATES, Memphis. Are you a woman seeking a man? If yes, press 1. If no, press 2.
Before Tinder and Bumble, before webcams, before OnlyFans, there was the phone. And the phone could sell anything.
You describe yourself as someone who is Caucasian. Press 1.
In the early 90s, phone chat lines were a billion-dollar industry. One of the biggest players, Megamates, billed as the fun, fast, easy way to meet local singles.
Now I would like you to record a public message. Briefly describe yourself and the type of person that you are looking for.
The industry's almost vanished now, but Megamates, it's still running. Still waiting for someone to pick up the phone.
You describe yourself as someone who is looking for a friend. Press 1. A casual date. Press 2.
Harmless, on the surface, no names, no faces, no keys exchanged at motel doors, anonymous, intimate, safe. That's the Megamates' promise. In fact, they have rules to keep it that way. Rules not everyone follows. When lines are crossed and phone hookups become face-to-face encounters, that's when the danger begins. That's when Danny Harris met Tammy Vance, the woman on the other end of the line.
And from then, from understanding, she came to his house. They had some relationships, and then there was some pause. From my understanding, what she told me, that she didn't come around for a while. Then it was some months later, Danny calls Tammy, asked her to come back. He needs her help.
July 2007, Tammy Vance moves in with Danny. He's barely scraping by, falling behind on rent, and she steps in to help.
She said that that house was very unkept. That, there was beer cans everywhere and cartons of cigarettes, and so she helped him. And she said she felt sorry for him.
Tammy also says she offered to go to work at a restaurant, but Danny shot her down. He wanted her to stick with what she was already doing.
She had been meeting men on this chat line that that she had met Danny through, and that she was going out on dates with these men and bringing back some of that money to help him pay some of his bills. And Danny was aware of that. And so he was in agreement that, she keep doing that, and he allowed her to have these men come over to his house.
This is where things get messy, because according to Tammy, there were a lot of people coming and going from Danny's place leading up to his death. Mostly men, criminals, drug users, all hours of the night. Police were questioning Tammy, but the suspect pool was now open to any man she'd brought over.
So, as these interrogations are going down, the police have different people in different rooms. And they're talking to Tammy, and initially Tammy is making denials, but at some point during the interrogation gets to the point that she admits her involvement in this crime. She's mitigating what she did, but she admits that she's involved in it. And she throws out the name of this other guy named Wayne Bobo.
A new name entered the investigation, Wayne Bobo. And when Tammy Vance said his name, it was like dropping match into gasoline. You see, I've spent months combing through what happened, talking to lawyers and investigators, peering through the evidence, the interrogation, the lies, and much of it comes back to this moment. A single name. One that kicked off a series of mistakes, missteps, and assumptions that spiraled into one of the most catastrophic failures of justice I've ever seen. Earlier, I said there are people who would rather this story stay buried. People who made decisions they'd rather not have questioned. I didn't anticipate how far I'd take this. But once I understood everything that happened in 2007, I made a decision to. Not just to make this podcast, but to ask the questions the cops didn't. To trace every name, every lie, every dead end they gave up on, until it's outed who's responsible. And if you look it up, what you'll find is this case is closed. But we're just getting started.
This was one of the quickest cases to get closed and one of the most poorly investigated cases I've ever seen.
I read in those statements, the very end of it, it says, you understand that this interview has been recorded.
But the day after, they say they do not have recording capabilities.
Would getting it out to the public help you at all?
I don't know yet. I mean, I'm thinking through kind of all my options at this point.
She was using his ATM card dozens of times on the day of the murder, after the day of the murder. It's like, come on.
Well, they're telling me that you're asking questions about me for what? That shit was closed years ago.
Well, it's open again.
Thank you for listening to Everything They Missed. Follow me on social media at the Stephanie Tinsley for extended interviews and deeper details into the story. And visit us anytime at everythingtheymissed.com to see photos, videos, or leave a voice message for me on our tip line if you think you have information to help this case. Also, don't forget to follow, rate, and review this show. It helps more than you know.
Stephanie, thank you so much for coming on the show. And everybody, check out the podcast, Everything They Missed. Lots of episodes out there for you to binge. I'm binging it myself. So thank you, Stephanie. I appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.